the cloud. Okay, go.
Good evening, everyone. Unless Zoom user is a new person to this group, everybody here knows exactly who I am. I don't need to introduce myself, but always good to see all of you here. And I barely need to touch on the Urban Chat mission statement, but just for form's sake, housing to meet local needs, mobility options with reduced use of cars. Not that we're war on cars. We won't go there, but it'd be nice if we had to use them less than we do now. Sustainable municipal finances, real key topic, and climate action. Dignitaries here this evening. Frank, I think you're it. Thank you for being here representing the city council. Um, that's all I see. Upcoming events. We will have our regular board meeting a week from tonight, I guess it'd be. No. Yeah, a
Yes,
week from
a
tonight,
week from
November
tonight.
19th. Be in a different location this time. We will be at Keller Co-work. Um, Anybody who wants to join us, the door's always open to our board meetings, and no secrets. Our monthly lunch will be a week earlier than usual. It will be November 20th. We didn't think lunch on Thanksgiving Day would be a good idea. So that's as always, that will be at Aquas. As always, or almost always, there will not be an agenda. Show up with a topic in mind, throw it on the table, and let's see where things go. And often they go in funny directions, good directions. KBYG, we'll only have one more KBYG, Know Before You Grow, before the year is over. It will be December 10th. Dan has convinced Carter Lavin, a transit advocate from Oakland, to speak to us. Carter has written a book called If You Want to Win, You've Got to Fight, about how to make things happen in the transit mobility world, although I think it applies in everything we talk about. He makes a really good point, and one I don't like, but he's right, that elegant arguments don't make things happen. They help a little bit, but power is how things happen. Showing up in bulk, uh, maybe even being disobedient at times, is how you make things happen. And I think it's a good lesson for all of us. I'm looking forward to his presentation that night. As of now, it will be strictly on Zoom, but we are talking about some possibilities. Dan and I didn't quite finish this conversation. We may see if it's possible to get him to drive up here if we can get something else put together with it. So that will be a conversation Dan and I will continue offline. And then we get to 2026. We've got a bunch of things coming up. I don't want to fill up your calendars now, but just be prepared for a busy 2026 on behalf of Urban Chat. Tonight, we are going to continue a conversation on strong towns. We began about a month ago with several videos from the same Not Just Bikes creator. The conversation tonight will continue on the financial feasibility or financial sustainability aspects of municipal planning. The best way to describe strong towns, I belong to them. I'm one of the charter members, 12 years in. The best way to describe them is they want us to build places that are financially sustainable for our grandchildren. We've dug holes. We need to start getting out of those holes. We need to leave a sustainable, financially sustainable world for those who come behind us. They make a really good point. It's a hard recipe to follow, but that's what really does have to happen. Tonight, we're going to look at two more videos on the financial aspects of it. We will probably play them back to back. Dan has them set up that way. But if questions come up, which is great, questions are always welcome, put them into chat. If something really good pops up during the first video, I may ask Dan to hold off for a minute in the second, and we can have a little Q&A before we move into the second, just to make sure we're all on the same page. The two videos together are about 20 minutes. After that, if the meeting we had a month ago on Strong Towns is any example, we'll probably have a conversation that goes on for another 45 minutes after that and go in some really good directions. So thanks for being here. And Dan, I don't think I've missed anything. If you want to start the first video, let's go.
All right.
This is the fourth video in my Strongtown series. You probably want to watch at least the last two videos to properly understand this one.
All right.
When some people see the growth Ponzi scheme graph for the first time, they may ask, we've been building car-dependent sprawl since the 1950s. Why are the suburbs still here? Shouldn't they all have gone bankrupt by now? And it's a completely reasonable question. Of course, there have been cities in the US that have gone bankrupt. Detroit, Michigan is the example most people think of, but there have been several others, such as Vallejo, California, or Jefferson County, Alabama. And Washington Park, Illinois, and Moffat, Oklahoma have declared bankruptcy twice. But before you jump on any of these particular examples, you should know that only 27 states even allow municipalities to declare bankruptcy, and of those, 15 have special conditions or limitations. So bankruptcies are not telling the whole story. Nevertheless, most car-dependent places are still here, so why is this? Before we get into the answer to that question, let's talk about how American cities used to be built. Consider an early city. It would start as a collection of shacks along a road or railroad like this one. A small number of people here would make some bets on the future and build their houses and shops nearby. Many of these attempts may have failed, but others were successful too, like this one. So the shacks became more permanent structures, and they could now afford to build some basic road and water infrastructure. As more time passed, the buildings became made of stone and granite. There was a permanence to it. A proper sewage system was built and the roads were upgraded. This would attract more people and the city would gradually grow outwards. Most importantly, as this place grew, it would build the wealth needed to sustain it. A place like this is never finished. Some parts will succeed and build up, others will fail and change their land use. But in post-World War II America, this approach changed completely. Instead of incrementally building upon the places they already had, American cities started building brand new places to a completed state in new neighborhoods on the edge of town, and left their existing places to rot away. Remember this photo from earlier? It's Front Street in Brainerd, Minnesota, 1871. In 1905, it looked like this. And this is what it looks like today. Because as pro-suburbanization policies came into place, it became cheaper and easier to build new buildings on the edge of town rather than to improve the places that already existed. People used to be so proud of this place that they had built that they put it on postcards. Nobody is making a postcard of this place. Incidentally, this is something that really bothers me when Americans claim they can't be like European cities because their cities were built for the car. This street wasn't built for the car, it was bulldozed for the car. It didn't have to be this way. But it's true that American suburbia was built to be car dependent. You need an automobile to do just about anything. But even more important is how differently these places were built and funded compared to anything that had ever been built before. This infrastructure was not built using existing wealth. Instead, in order to accelerate growth, federal and state funds were used to build these places, paid for by government bonds.
Chicagoans raised their share of the $92 million cost by a bond issue. Interest and retirement to be paid for by future revenue.
Borrowing money to finance expansion is traditional with Americans. The time and money saved more than repays your investment. If you wait to pay as you go, you may not go at all.
Now you could argue that debt in itself isn't necessarily a problem, as long as that debt can be repaid. But as we've discussed in previous episodes, sprawling car-dependent places cannot sustain themselves. The amount of tax revenue collected is not sufficient to cover the replacement cost of the infrastructure. The roads, electrical wires, water pipes, and wastewater systems are spread out over a huge area, while servicing very few people who actually pay for it. This creates an illusion of wealth. These cities and suburbs look wealthy because of their new infrastructure, but in the long term, they're financially insolvent. But the effects of this are not seen until that infrastructure is due to be replaced, which only starts to happen after about 25 years. When these infrastructure maintenance bills come due, the city needs to find a way to pay for them, and if the city is not growing, they can't just sweep the problem under the rug. The first reaction of many people is to just increase tax revenues. But this shows a lack of understanding of the scale of the problem. Strong Towns has several examples from actual real-world cities and towns. Tampa, Florida, for example, needs to pay $3.2 billion to repair its water systems, requiring an 8 times increase in spending. Fun fact, Tampa already pays more in debt payments on water infrastructure than it spends on maintaining water infrastructure. An extreme case is the small town of Bacchus, Minnesota, which was at the end of life of its wastewater system. But because this town was made up of sprawling low-productivity car-centric infrastructure, the wastewater system was sprawling and wasteful as well. This replacement cost was $27,000 per family, which was the median household income in the town. You can't just tax people their entire yearly income. Of course, in any sane country, a small, low-density town wouldn't have a wastewater system. Each home would have its own septic tank, maintained by the household. But this is the problem with the American mentality around car-dependent sprawl. Everybody expects urban services with near-rural densities. Municipal water and sewage systems, buried electrical cables, traffic lights, garbage collection, fully paved multi-lane arterial roads to every neighborhood, but they're not willing to actually pay for it. The American dream never said nothing about maintaining your own septic tank. So an American town, placed in this situation, takes money from federal and state governments and rebuilds the wastewater system. Here's another small town in Minnesota that had the same problem, and their bailout package looked like this. This single wastewater project amounted to 37 times the amount raised annually from property taxes. You may think that talking about cities this way in terms of their finances is crude or excessively neoliberal. After all, cities are much more than their balance sheet, and not everything in a city needs to turn a profit. But ultimately, in order to provide a high quality of life in your town or city, you need to have the money to actually pay for services. There are regular articles in the US about cities closing libraries, turning off streetlights overnight, or deferring road maintenance so much that their roads become worse than Belgium's. You can't make your city great if you're financially insolvent. Incidentally, Canadian cities are somewhat insulated from this problem because there are legal debt limits for many cities in Canada. For example, in Ontario, annual debt repayments cannot exceed 25% of a city's revenue. Though keep in mind that there's no such limit on provincial debt, and ultimately the province may be paying for a lot of that new infrastructure. Now, as we've discussed in previous videos, a growing city can just build more developments on the edge of town. This provides a quick influx of new tax revenue, and this can be used to pay for the previous generation of infrastructure liabilities. Again, this isn't built on the wealth of places that already exist. It's building new places in the suburbs, even as existing inner ring suburbs may be falling into disrepair. To create this growth, the city needs to build out new infrastructure, and that is usually paid for with a mix of funds from federal and state governments, as well as debt. This chart shows the increase in US public sector debt since the 1950s, and you can see where the first and second generation of suburban infrastructure liabilities comes due. Now, when you plot this public sector debt against US GDP, you might argue that the levels of debt seem proportional. I'm not going to get into that. But this graph is hiding something. Because while local governments take on their own debt to build infrastructure, eventually somebody needs to actually buy the houses and businesses, usually with debt and mortgages. In the first generation of car-dependent suburbia, this private sector debt was minimal. But look at what happens as we get into the second and third generation of the suburban experiment. Here you can start to see how, instead of building on wealth that already exists in cities, America is financing its insolvent car-dependent sprawl by heavily indebting its citizens to fund that growth. But don't worry, after the 2008 financial crisis, everyone realized their mistake and it's all fine now. Of course, there's way more to this than just suburbia. The entire American economy is built on a dangerous dependence on debt and growth. But that's getting far beyond the topic of this video or even this YouTube channel. So let's get back to talking about cities. We need to reevaluate how cities are built and financed. For centuries, cities were built by many people making small bets, and, as those places succeeded and generated wealth, they were upgraded and improved upon, building successful cities. But that means taking advantage of the infrastructure that already exists. Instead of constantly building out new public infrastructure, we need to densify the places that have already been created, and build upon the wealth that's already there, to make cities that can sustain themselves. Now, low-density suburbs and rural areas are fine too, but these places can't expect the same level of services that you'd find in a major city. In future videos in this series, we'll discuss which parts of cities operate at a loss and which parts keep them afloat, and how the poorest Americans are subsidizing wealthy suburbanites. But there are a few topics we need to discuss first, like these awful places. I'd like to thank my supporters on Patreon who pay me to bore you with graphs. If you'd like to support the channel and get access to bonus videos, visit patreon.com/notjustbikes.
Okay, there are no questions in chat. So Dan, why don't you continue on with the next one? And despite what the speaker just said, we are going to skip the ones on Scrodes, et cetera, and move on to the next one on finances. Go for it.
This is the city of Lafayette, Louisiana. It's a pretty typical mid-sized American city. Like most American cities, it has that one nice old building that didn't get bulldozed in the 60s. And like most American cities, it's broke. It's full of aging infrastructure in desperate need of repair and not enough money to maintain it. But unlike most American cities, Lafayette acknowledged this fact and requested the help of Strong Towns and Urban 3, a consulting company that helps cities better understand the economic impact of development. Their analysis in Lafayette uncovered a harsh reality that should be a wake-up call to every municipality in North America, as well as any city emulating the American car-centric style of development. But let's back up a bit. In a previous video in this series, we discussed how two identical lots in the same city have very different property tax revenue. In this example, a 100-year-old commercial block built in the traditional style of development drastically outperformed a shiny new development created in the modern car-centric style. But despite the differences in revenue, both blocks have the same cost to the city to maintain their infrastructure. So by bulldozing an old block of shops to build this car-centric second-rate taco joint, the city was destroying its wealth. This example alone should be enough to convince anyone that the modern car-centric suburban style of development is broken, but it's worth exploring this further. Does this hold up in other cities? And what happens when we bring into account the cost of servicing these properties with roads, water pipes, sewers, etc.? And that brings us back to Lafayette. This is a map of the revenue and expenses data uncovered by Urban 3. So what are we looking at? Well, any successful business tracks its ROI, its return on investment. When making a decision between two competing projects, it's critical to know which one will result in the most revenue compared to the investment put into it.
My daughter is being treated for leukemia. It hit me
Apologies for the ad.
being a girl dad.
And too many projects with a negative return on investment could bankrupt a company. But in order to know your ROI, you need to know two things: your revenue and your expenses. Urban 3 created a kind of municipal return on investment for Lafayette. This map shows the municipal revenue per acre. So why per acre other than the fact that Americans can't use metric? Well, every property in a city needs services, and the majority of services get more expensive the more spread out they are. Roads are the obvious example. The farther a parcel of land is from everything else, the more asphalt is needed to get there. The worst case scenario are cul-de-sac, which are basically just city-subsidized driveways. This also applies to water infrastructure, sewers, and all other physical infrastructure, as well as the cost of policing, fire department coverage, and even the cost of providing education. But while per area revenue is actually quite a good approximation, Urban 3 wanted to fully understand these expenses, so they painstakingly calculated the cost of services for each parcel of land in Lafayette. It looks something like this. This shows every area that's a net positive for the city in gray, and every area that's a net negative in red. And here it is in 3D. This analysis has some fascinating results. The first is that downtown is wildly profitable. This is a bit surprising because there's nothing particularly remarkable about downtown Lafayette. It's certainly not bad, but you'd never know from looking at these pictures that this is the economic engine of the city, while places like this are a drain on city finances. But this shouldn't be too surprising when you think about it, because there's an insane amount of asphalt and infrastructure here for a very small number of shops. And for some bizarre reason, the Google Street View car drove down every aisle of this parking lot. But since they did it over multiple years, you can move down this way and watch the Toys R Us go out of business. Most of these profitable gray areas are the historical neighborhoods built along the river. But one of the biggest spikes is this place, a modern mixed-use walkable neighborhood called River Ranch. Places like this are a net positive for the city. One of the most shocking discoveries that Strongtown's discovered is that the replacement cost of all of the infrastructure in Lafayette, something that you would expect to happen over about one generation, was about $32 billion. And that's just infrastructure, not all the other everyday costs needed to run a city. Yet the existing tax base was much smaller than that. In order to bridge the difference, Strongtown's calculated that the average family in Lafayette would see their tax bill go from about $1,500 per year to $9,200 per year. But the median household income in Lafayette was only $41,000 at the time. There's simply no way that can happen. But those simple averages are hiding the bigger picture of who's subsidizing who. Because these gray sections are the poorer areas, while these red areas are significantly wealthier. So here's a fun quiz. Which of these two neighborhoods is subsidizing the other? Number 1 or number 2? Yeah, it's the first one that's subsidizing the second. The poorest people in Lafayette are consistently subsidizing wealthy suburbanites. But I don't want to pick on Lafayette here. As I said at the beginning, there's nothing particularly unique about Lafayette, and these results are typical for most American cities. Well, I guess in Lafayette, the suburban sprawl is built on former wetlands, which results in unusually high costs for stormwater management, but otherwise, it's pretty typical. So let's look at another city that's not literally built on a swamp, Eugene, Oregon. Here's the Urban 3 map of taxable value per acre. Once again, downtown is clearly visible. And here's the 3D map of revenue compared to expenses. It's still obvious where downtown is, but you might be wondering about this little bump over here. This is Crescent Village, a modern mixed-use development, because once again, these kinds of mixed-use walkable neighborhoods financially outperform car-dependent suburbia every single time. By the way, here's what that 3D map of Eugene looks like from below. The red spikes correspond almost perfectly to modern car-centric suburban developments, a visual reminder that car-dependent suburbia is being subsidized by productive urban places. The data from Urban 3 makes the subsidies visible, and it makes it very clear who's subsidizing who. In Eugene, Urban 3 analyzed 9 categories of development: residential, mixed-use, and commercial in low, medium, and high density. And here's what the average revenue for the city looked like after taking into account the servicing of these properties. In the case of Eugene, the low-density suburban housing is being subsidized by everything else. People may look at this and say, but I want to live in a low-density single-family home, and that's fine, but only if you're also willing to pay for it. But there's a bigger problem. This is what the land use map looks like for Eugene, Oregon. The majority of land is zoned exclusively for single-family residential, which means that the majority of properties in the city are a net negative to city finances. And this is a pretty typical result for an American city. When you see results like this, is there any surprise that American cities are broke? Here's the tax revenue per acre for South Bend, Indiana. See if you can spot downtown. Or here in Charleston, South Carolina. Or in St. Paul, Minnesota. And here's the entire state of New Hampshire, with all of the traditional downtown neighborhoods clearly visible. In every case, in every region Urban 3 is analyzed, traditional, mixed-use, walkable neighborhoods dramatically outperform car-centric suburbia. But in North America, we've made it difficult, or even impossible, to build new neighborhoods this way because of modern zoning and other car-centric regulations. Of course, these mathematics apply outside of America as well. Here's a map of Auckland, New Zealand. You can clearly see the increased city revenue along transit lines. And you need to zoom out significantly to see downtown because it is so financially productive. So what do we do with this information? Well, our cities, through their policies, can decide what kind of developments they encourage. The city of Guelph in Ontario, Canada, not far from my hometown, is an excellent example. In 2013, Guelph needed more room, and like all Canadian cities, they were considering expanding their borders and sprawling. But after running this kind of ROI analysis, they decided to focus on infill developments by making it cheaper and easier for developers to create buildings that encourage walkable neighborhoods, like this one. Here's what the revenue per hectare because Canada looked like for Guelph in 2013. Not bad. In general, Canadian cities are better with their finances than American cities. But here it is in 2016 and in 2019. This is what a financially solvent city looks like. So which path will the financially struggling American cities choose for their future? They can decide to make it easy to build mixed-use walkable neighborhoods, making good use of land and encouraging walking, cycling, and public transit. Or they can build more of this garbage and go bankrupt. Seems like a pretty easy decision to me. I'd like to thank my supporters on Patreon who pay me to mathematically annihilate the suburbs in 3D.
All right,
If you
we
like this kind
can
of content, check out Strong
run through
Towns and
this. I'm
Urban
not sure
3.
what the
And
licensing
if you really like
agreement
this
is.
kind of video, visit patreon.com/notjustbikes.
Okay, thank you, Dan. There was one question came through on chat. Abigail Smith asked whether Urban 3 could do this kind of analysis for Petaluma. Actually, they did. In 2012, a group called Urban Community Partners, working primarily with Santa Rosa and Windsor, was able to get Strong Towns and Urban 3 into Sonoma County to provide this kind of work. They took a quick look at Petaluma. I'm not sure if Petaluma actually participated financially, but there was some work done down here regardless. In 2016, the founding principal of Urban 3 came and spoke to Know Before You Grow. Actually, it was the very first meeting we ever had. He didn't have a lot of the data with him at the time, but he did provide one data point that has always stuck with me. And probably most of you heard me say this before, but I'll pose it as a quiz question for those of you who may not have heard me say this before. Do you know, based on tax revenue, net tax revenue per square foot, what the single most valuable piece of property in Petaluma was in 2012? Anybody got a guess?
I think it was the Hotel Petaluma.
Exactly. Yeah. You've heard me say it before, but yes,
Yeah.
absolutely correct. And remember, now we think of the Hotel Petaluma as a pretty cool place to stay. The lobby is marvelous. In 2012, it was an SRO. And yet still it was the single most valuable piece of property in Petaluma per square foot. And what you see in other communities is similar. In Santa Rosa at the time, the most valuable property was another building. I'm drawing a blank on the name, Rosenthal building, which was also an SRO, although it's been converted back into a different use since then. So, and if the Appalachian Hotel ever gets built, I have no doubt that would immediately become the most valuable new piece of property. So thanks, Abigail, for asking the question. I see no other questions in chats.
Well, Teddy popped in there with, how do we communicate this to a population that isn't going to watch even the length of these videos? Are there short blip communication programs that would work for social media? One of the things I keep telling Charlene is if I knew how to communicate this stuff, it would have been communicated.
Yeah, hey, exactly right. It's something we talk about all the time at Urban Chat and elsewhere. How do you communicate in a world that is so fractured right now? It used to be when the newspaper, half the town already knew about it and they shared it with the other half. Now the newspaper may not be in business next week. I'm making that up, but just, and if you go to Facebook and Instagram, you're getting your own echo chamber. I don't know. Thanks for all of you who are here tonight, but it's a problem. Teddy, thanks for asking. Okay, chat's not getting much action here. Anybody want to raise their hands?
Comment.
Oh, come on, somebody.
Joe, this is Joe. Can I just make a comment?
Go.
Well, again, this is my first time here, so I may be speaking out of school, but with regard to the communication effort, I'm a big fan of one country in the world, Switzerland. what they do in most of the cities is they have parliaments. So you have a city of maybe 150,000 people, which will have its own parliament of 100 people. So, like all of you here on this video, you might have a chance of being elected to parliament for Petaluma. And then the group of you who would be informed and make decisions, you would kind of set direction for the rest of the community who might not be as involved as you guys are. So this whole idea of a bigger representative body kind of guiding a city is something that's done in Switzerland all over the place. So that's the possible way for communicating is some group like you or others who aren't even here form a bigger collective body that actually do make decisions for the city and they kind of lead the way. That's the idea.
So effectively, you're just saying a larger city council.
It could be that you also probably need, they have, some of the cities, they have administrative bodies that actually run the city. So the day-to-day running of it, but the setting of laws, the direction that the city's going, the thing that involve deliberation that set the course for thing, that can be done by a group of people like this who can kind of things where it should go, they debate it, they talk about it, and then they ultimately vote. And I stress that how important that is. That they don't just talk about it, they vote on it. They may actually make decisions. And then what happens is the city people who actually administer or make it happen. This group here wouldn't be responsible for running the city unless you want to. You'd be more the direction, the policies, where you want to head. That would be the idea from Switzerland. One idea.
Well, and from talking with Joe previously regarding Switzerland, I know he's also a big fan of the multi-party system. They think that it doesn't get tied up in the bi-party system the way we do in the US. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and that's important because people, if you do what I'm proposing here, people have to be convinced that the body you create is representative. So that people's different views, their different perspectives, whatever they are, that they find themselves given fair voice in that body. So that's what you'd have to, proportional representation is a form of, I'm not sure if you all are familiar with how this works. I'm not going to go into detail unless you want me to, but it's a way to assure yourself that you're going to have more political parties representing various points of view that you could then theoretically depend upon to carry your views forward. So you need proportional representation in addition to the parliament to make that work. And by the way, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Now, I love this conversation. I think we probably should veer back toward city finances. Mary Davies, for those of you who may not have the chat window open, Mary Davies asked, why aren't we building on downtown lots? We need SROs. And, you know, it's interesting. There actually is a developer in town right now who is talking about, can you build an SRO from scratch? Can you build a boarding house from scratch? I'm not convinced they can get there, but I'm glad they're asking the question. And the whole vacancy question is, it's key. I mean, it's, you know, the bare lots downtown, and, you know, we don't need to get into the politics of it right now. But yes, it is unfortunate. Dan, there is a Georgist aspect to this. We have a team at Urban Chat who has been assessing the downtown vacant parcels, identifying where they are, coming up with, I don't want to say coming up with thoughts about where to go, but coming up with a good inventory and putting together a program for us. I think the first program in February, where they will give a summary of vacant parcels and then ask for some group involvement in assessing what it would take to get those parcels moving ahead. So, Mary, good question. If you want to join that team, I can make that introduction.
And I noticed Mary has her virtual hand up if she wants to pipe in here.
She does. I was losing it against the color of the wall there. Mary, go for it. You're on mute. Still on mute.
5 years into Zoom and we're still figuring it out.
Okay, I think I got it.
You do.
Yeah. So what about the recent, I mean, what about Quarry Heights? What about the recent developments there along the boulevard? Are they treasure chests for our city. I mean, they're kind of compact and all that. Are we doing some things right?
We're getting closer. Good for us. There is a data point in the city memo for tomorrow night's General Plan Advisory Committee meeting. It was a data point that I want more background on. But for those of you who've looked at the tentative land use map for the updated general plan, we show a lot more multi-story development than we've ever had in the past, a lot of 3, 4, 5-story. The economic consultant on the general plan team assessed the long-term future of those parcels. If they're built out fully as the general plan allows, do they cover their costs? And the answer is still no. They're very close. They're about $18 million in annual expenses, $18 million in revenue, but it's still on the negative side by about $270,000. So the answer is, even at a much denser approach to development, as the general plan is envisioning, we still don't get to be neutral. And so anything else we're seeing built more recently is better than the earlier sprawl, but it's not anywhere near good enough. That help?
Thanks.
Okay. Any other hands?
So
Could I, yeah, sorry, could I just say one more thing?
Sure, go for it.
Well, just, looking at these videos, then the next one, this one jumped in that said the one big problem in building small, dense downtown apartment buildings is that we require 2 stairways. And so I'm wondering about the impact, and that was the thing, they really did look at the issue of safety and, how it seemed like a good idea at the time. We no longer need it. Is that kind of thing a problem to our getting more of that development?
It's not a complete solution, but yes, the 2 stairway problem is it's one of the many factors that makes development more expensive. There has fairly consistently been legislation put into the hopper at Sacramento to eliminate that requirement. Just for those of you who know, I can't think what kind of buildings it applies to. I think any building above 3 stories requires 2 separate stairways for egress in the case of fire, which 100 years ago made a lot of sense. Now, given sprinkler systems, fireproof materials, it just doesn't really make sense anymore. And I believe every country in the world allows single stairway buildings except for the US and Canada. The group I belong to, Congress for the New Urbanism, especially the California chapter, has been pushing to eliminate the 2nd stairwell requirement, but it is a tough climb. It will happen eventually. We're not there yet. It won't solve the problem, but it's a step in the right direction. A question came in on chat, and I'll get back to Teddy next. Would Know Before You Grow take a position on a vacancy tax? It's a really good question. We've had a lot of conversations about it with the vacancy team that's been looking at the situation. I don't want to give away the answer. I'm not sure I know the answer yet. It will be a topic we discussed in our February meeting. Teddy.
I'm wondering if your subgroup for Urban Chat and possibly even the General Plan Advisory Committee looks at the topic of what size building will a developer build, like especially downtown. Is a developer ever going to build a 3-story building?
There was a study done by the general plan consultant through their economic subconsultant. I think it's called Economic Strategies out of Berkeley, and very, very well respected. They were asked by the city to look at doing a 5-story building. And the answer was, you can't even make a 5-story building financially work. The way they did the analysis was to say, knowing the cost of a building, how much could you afford to pay for the land and have the project be feasible? And the answer was, you would need to have somebody give you the land and $700,000 to make a 5-story building work. However, there's always a caveat. You look at a standard, you come up with a standard case, and you're always going to be missing some individual situations where it might work. Clearly, we had a developer who thought for a long time that the Oyster Cove project could be financially feasible at 3 stories. It took a lot of things going crosswise before he finally walked away. So I wouldn't give up on 4 and 5-story buildings, but in probably most cases, you're gonna have to go above that to reach economic or financial feasibility. And by the way, that study about the 5-story building, that should be somewhere on the general plan website. If you dig a little bit, you can probably find it. If not, I can help look for it. So. Come on, folks. There's gotta be more questions than this. This is good stuff. Dwayne, go for it. Dwayne, you're on mute.
Well,
No,
yes.
you're not.
The example that was offered of a town where the average income was 41,000 and the cost of just maintaining one of the infrastructures was 9,000 a year.
Yep.
Or was 9,000, I guess 9,000 a year was the tax base. Now, currently, well, I first of all would ask whether the people living in the suburbs had the average income for that community. That it said the average income was 41. But even if it is, people right now living in many areas are paying 1/3 of their income for housing. And that would assume, let's say 41 divided by 3 would be almost 11,000. And you say the cost here is 9,000. That would mean that their tax bill would be 9,000 and they'd have 2,000 left over to make their house payment. And that would basically tell us what housing on the suburbs are worth. And if we would adjust our tax system so that the actual cost of maintaining it was charged to the house involved, the house prices would drop to 10% of what they are now. Where's the problem?
The problem, Dwayne, is politics. You try convincing people to change the tax system so they lose 90% of the value of their home. Good luck.
Thank you.
So Keith has popped into the chat with a question about the 5-story building. Was that mixed use, commercial, or all residential? My guess is that it would all be one or the other because retail, for the retail part of mixed use, is almost always a loss.
It is, but it's a great question on Keith's part, and I've forgotten if I ever knew the answer to it. But given that most of our codes still require ground floor retail, I'm guessing that's what they looked at. But I'm sure Keith's follow-up question would be, if you make it all residential, might it be financially feasible? I'm going to guess not, but I'm guessing it'd be a lot closer, and that is a good conversation to have going forward. Thanks, Keith. Abigail comes in, is the 5-story formula applicable to most cities in California? I'm guessing the number will vary a little bit. I mean, it's really a ratio between what people can afford to pay in rent, what salaries are effectively, versus what the cost of construction is. And right now in Petaluma, I think that's more out of balance than other cities. Construction costs are up here and salaries are still down here a little bit. But it's probably not too far away from 5 stories in other towns.
I have a question.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Joe.
My question is how much does it cost to build one apartment for a 2-bedroom apartment in general? Like, so assuming a person had an expectation of being able to live in a 2-bedroom apartment, whatever you want to call it, how much does it cost to build one unit like that?
It's a really fun question. I'll give you 2 answers. If you're doing market rate housing, no subsidies, no special requirements, 800, 850,000. If it's going to be affordable housing, meaning union labor, other requirements on the money you get, free money you get from the state, it's probably over $1 million in most places now.
That is really a lot. I mean, okay. I mean, let's just start off right away. We got a real problem here. I mean, I mean, that is, for me, that sounds $800,000 to build a 2-bedroom apartment someplace. That seems like a lot. Now, it would seem some other part of the country doesn't cost that much. I mean, there are places, someone I just know bought a home in Notre Dame, a Notre Dame alum, bought a house, 4 bedrooms, something like this, for $200,000 in South Bend, Indiana.
Oh, I've heard same stories in Kentucky from Dwayne, and I mean, yeah, the cost of labor here is high. The permitting standards are high, the environmental requirements are high, and some of that, I'm not saying that's bad, but it certainly drives those costs up. And the other thing is, when you say a 2-bedroom apartment, I automatically put that at 1,100 square feet, something of that neighborhood. Our grandparents probably lived in 2-bedroom homes that were 600 square feet. I live in a house right now that, when originally built, was 680 square feet, 3 bedrooms. So even when we say bedrooms, everything's gotten bigger and bigger, and there's costs tied to it. Yeah.
I'd additionally add to that we have talked about parking here, and depending on how many parking spaces you are adding to that unit, each parking space is more square footage than the bedroom is. And if you require a parking space per bedroom, that could easily run you over 100,000 a parking space.
Yeah, if you build structured parking, you're on the 100,000 range. If you do all at grade parking, it'd be a little less than that, but then you're sucking up the land that might have gone to another unit or another building. So there are no good answers for parking
So if you
other
just
than doing away with it.
you take those two numbers, you take your $800,000 for the 2-bedroom apartment, add 100, 200,000, you're like at $1 million for a 2-bedroom apartment. And then if you
Well,
borrowed all that money, it'd be $70,000 a year in debt service, property taxes of 10,000 or something. It's like $100,000 a year. I mean, that is a lot.
well, the most recent number I heard is for a family of 4 to earn enough money not to qualify for some level of affordable housing, the annual income for the household has to be 125,000. So, below 125,000, you are still in a, I don't want to say poverty class, but a low income class. Yeah.
I think part of the issue with the cost, really stems. We're still living in a hangover from the Great Recession. 2008 through 2012 decimated American home builders, and many of those folks went out of business, and most of them never came back. On top of that, in a place like California, you have the regulatory and zoning issues that you have to overcome to try to build a home. And it completely disincentivizes, anybody from going into the building homes trade. Like, when's the last time you met someone that says they want to start a business building homes? So it really starts with, in my point of view, there needs to be a Herculean effort to overhaul our zoning and our regulatory environment to make it so that it's not so difficult while maintaining safety. I think that can be done. But we have to put real effort into training folks how to build homes. I think some of our junior colleges, if you've been out to Santa Rosa Junior College in Petaluma, they've got a great program going on out there. But it's not just teaching people how to, use saws and swing hammers, or nowadays I guess they're all using nail guns. But teaching folks how to graduate from actual framing to running a company specifically for building homes, like whether that requires some kind of help from the state or something to build that, no pun intended, but to build that knowledge base, I think is really important. You're never going to solve the labor problem until we solve that issue.
Well said. I see Keith Schilt's hand is up. Also, I see a question from Nick Harris. I don't know which happened first, but I'm going to respond to Nick's question, then Keith's right behind that. Nick asked, why do cities approve urban sprawl if it's known they won't be able to recoup long-term R&M costs? The answer is long-term. I think as we heard from the Strong Town videos, for the first 25 years, new development is a cash cow for the city. Great new property taxes, nothing to maintain. It's how you keep the other stuff afloat, is by always allowing new development at the edge. But every time you do that, you're digging a deeper hole for your grandkids. One example, and I don't say this a lot, but I've really been thinking about it a lot. Petaluma has not built very much new housing in the last 15 or 20 years. I know there's a lot of concern about we've built too much, but really we're growing about 0.5% per year, which is a remarkably low number. And we are starting to hear rumblings of financial problems coming. I think we have begun a little bit divorcing ourselves from the Ponzi scheme of always building sprawl, and we're starting to pay the price for it. And it's going to be painful. We're maybe going through withdrawal here in the near future, but I'm glad we're doing it. So just one thought. Keith, what do you got?
Well, I was trying to do a hand clap to Frank's comment, and apparently I did the wrong reaction. I've only been working on Zoom for 8 years, so what do I know? So, but the other question about this is how do we get to a place where, there's shop people who they're running businesses in downtown Petaluma, small businesses, and they're renting way up in Santa Rosa and elsewhere where it's cheaper. That's not a sustainable effort in the long run at all. Yet at the same time, we're building places, and I happen to live in one, and I'm not going to name the development, that was built by non-union folks. And the quality can be sometimes not as good. And also, those people who are building these homes don't even live within 100, well, maybe 50 miles of here. That's not a sustainable proposition either. So, we have a lot of stuff going on in front of us. And, I think education is the key to this, and people have to be informed, and we have to talk to them. But yeah, they may want to have to listen also.
I agree. I mean, the mayor typically points out that the number of people who have to commute 50 miles or more to come to a job in Petaluma, whether it's building homes or waiting tables, that's an environmental disaster. And every time we talk about we're climate ready and we're not building enough home to find a way for people who want to work here to actually live here, we are not as nearly as climate ready as we'd like to pretend. So
I think,
Dave, I was at the intersection of Lakeville and D Street 2 days ago, and I noticed there was a sandwich board on the corner that said new homes for sale, and it was pointing towards Scott's Ranch. And so we all know that that's there are some new homes that are going in out there. They're not very many. They're probably not the kind of homes that folks on this in this meeting would advocate for, but they're new homes. What struck me was how out of place a sign that said new homes for sale is in Petaluma. It occurred to me that it's such a rare sighting to see that as good progressives, we should consider putting that on the endangered species list. If we put the new homes for sale sign on the endangered species list, maybe we could get some people rallied around protecting it and trying to bring it back, So anyway, just food for thought.
no, great comment, Frank. And I agree with you that what's happening at Scott Ranch is not the kind of home we think we need, but often any kind of home we can build. And I'm not going to defend building at Scott's Ranch. I sort of wish we had found a way not to, but even if the only kind of homes we can build are luxury homes, somebody will move into those and free up another home that might be where somebody who's moving out of affordable housing can move into. If all we do is build affordable housing, we create a model where the minute people are successful and no longer qualified to stay in their home there, they have to move to Vallejo. And that's not the model we should be following either. We need housing in every single demographic segment. Bill Reinhardt.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Say, just had a thought, something I have never heard about, but curious. Have you, Dave, ever heard of an assessment where they actually calculate the relative cost of new development, and then they build in an assessment, sort of like an LID or an LLD, or a homeowners association, where they can amortize some money and pay for future improvements? Have you heard of that?
Not that exact model, but something very similar to it. The town of Fate, Texas, requires that every project that is proposed must be economically sustainable. So basically, they open the door for, if you really want to build a project of a certain kind, doesn't meet the standards of that city, you need to find a way to create the additional revenue. And your idea of some kind of an assessment district could be a way to get there. So, I don't know where Fate is these days. I first knew about them 8 years ago. It was a bunch of really young kids, 30, 35-year-old, who had come up with this idea. They've probably been run out of town on rails by now, but at the time it was very creative, and I'd sort of like to know what has happened to them. So
you bring that up at council next week, okay?
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
I'll do it. I'll do that right after you do, Bill. Thanks. Keith, are you kidding about buying a home at Scott's Ranch?
Dave, I'm going to go with your theory that any home that we can build and other people can move into other homes is fantastic. So I'll just leave it at that right now.
No, hey, if you free up the home you're in now and somebody gets to move into there, it's still a good thing.
I'll let you know when it's up for sale.
Okay. Okay. What else do we have now? Are we really done for the night?
We may have hit it.
Hey. Well, one thing I should finish up with, and I think I mentioned in my weekly email that this is membership week for Strong Towns. You can tell the kind of thing they're doing. It really is cool. As this meeting was going on, I got a email from the director of, what do they call him? Director of Local Development, something like that, at Strong Towns, asking how we're doing on our membership week for Strong Towns. So this is my plug to say Strong Towns does great work. It doesn't cost much to join. It makes you feel good, makes me feel good to be part of it. So I encourage it. And with that, I think we're done.
We'll see some subset of you next week. Good night, all.
Very good. Night.
Good night.